Avon Resources Limited is a gold exploration company with significant projects in British Columbia and the Yukon, trading on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol ABN, and the OTCQB, symbol ABNAF. Surrounded by world-class gold deposits and mines, Avon's 23,000 hectares Forest Kerr Gold Project is located in the heart of the Golden Triangle in northwestern BC. For more information, visit us at avonresources.com.
Welcome to the Goddard Report. Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is award-winning investigative reporter Bob Mackin, the publisher of thebreaker.news. Welcome back to the show, Bob.
Thank you.
The writ has dropped the election campaign in Canada officially on, and I guess that means that the Prime Minister can't drive around in a truck anymore and shovel cash out the back. How much did he throw off the back of that armored car? $12 billion, something like that?
Don't have the exact figures, but it was re-announcements or more detail about what was in the budget. And the budget is actually what's troubling and should be on the minds of voters as we go forward October 21st, because in no uncertain terms, in 2015, Justin Trudeau ran on a platform that he was going to run about a $10 billion deficit in his first year in government, but he was going to get the economy going faster and bring more revenue in, and his plan was based on the Parliamentary Budget Office numbers from 2015, that his plan was by 2019 to have the budget balanced again. You know, the budget was going to balance itself. It didn't. And even when the budget couldn't balance itself, Justin Trudeau was promising to balance the budget. It didn't happen. And right now in the books, looking at a $19 billion deficit for the fiscal year. So that's a major, major trouble that Andrew Scheer is going to definitely remind him of going forward in this campaign, where it looks like Justin Trudeau may only go to 2 of the 5 major leaders' debates. They're going to try to keep him away from the serious questions, and Justin Trudeau is going to do what he's been doing for several months, just trying to deflect attention away from him and his broken promises, and try to point at the Ontario Conservatives and say, well, if you got a federal Conservative government, you'll have Ontario-style conservatism like Doug Ford, and you'll have lots of cuts. But then again, that should be part of the discussion too. Well, there might have to be cuts in order to keep Canada's credit rating and to keep Canada's budget afloat, because of the wild deficit that happened when times were not so bad. We expect governments to make deficit spending when the economy's bad, and when the economy needs a stimulus, government dips into the accounts and throws money out there. As we saw during the last time we had a recession in Canada, or a major recession back in 2008, you saw that the federal Conservatives spent a lot more on infrastructure to try to get the economy moving. Well, the economy really didn't need that kind of stimulus this time around from 2015 to 2019. But Justin Trudeau spent that much money anyways. $19 billion deficit is what the end result is after promising to balance the budget in 2015.
Andrew Scheer, in his opening speech for the election campaign, called the Prime Minister a liar almost a dozen times. Is that going to be his continued campaign chant, Trudeau's a liar?
It'll have to be, because of the continuing scandal of SNCLavalin, which, of course, Andrew Scheer and the other leaders have to do their best to try to articulate why the public should take notice of this and should care for this. There's some pundits out there that say this is not a scandal worth the public caring about, and the public doesn't care about it. Well, the public should, because SNC-Lavalin is a major company, major force in Quebec. They're a major force here in British Columbia, involved in all sorts of public infrastructure. I mean, here in British Columbia, they built the Sea to Sky Highway, they built the Canada Line, they've been involved as a contractor with BC Ferries. They were going to be bidding on the Pattullo Bridge, and we're going to be bidding on the Broadway Subway, but now that's not going to happen, although SNC-Lavalin does have a minor role in one of the bid teams trying to get the contract in a design role for the bridge. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. Yeah, how much of SNC-Lavalin's money that Canadian taxpayers paid the company to build infrastructure here in Canada went into another pocket at SNC-Lavalin and got taken out of that pocket and given around the world as bribery? How much of that money was spent in corrupt fashion? Of course, SNC-Lavalin's facing criminal trial in Quebec, and that's really why this scandal is alight, because Justin Trudeau did whatever he could to try to, although unsuccessfully, convince Jody Wilson-Raybould while she was Attorney General to tell the prosecution service not to pursue a trial, but instead negotiate some kind of settlement under a regime that SNC-Lavalin actually lobbied for. So Justin Trudeau created a law that was suited for SNC-Lavalin to try to keep SNC-Lavalin away from the courts, to try to keep the consequences away from SNC-Lavalin and its corruption. And that is why we're here today. That's why Jody Wilson-Raybould is running as an independent in Vancouver-Granville, and that's why the Globe and Mail reported on the eve of the election that the Privy Council office, which is connected to the Prime Minister's office, the Privy Council office has not been cooperating with the RCMP, which is just trying to investigate whether there was criminal obstruction of justice in the SNC-Lavalin case. Similar to what happened with Mario Dion, the ethics commissioner, in his report back in August. He complained that he tried to get documents out of the Privy Council office. He wanted to get cabinet documents, see what cabinet was deliberating on in black and white, but the Privy Council office cited cabinet confidentiality, and the Privy Council office continues to cite cabinet confidentiality to prevent the RCMP from learning as much as it can on what was going on behind closed doors. Now, the Privy Council office, Justin Trudeau and other Liberals like to say that it's nonpartisan civil servants, but they report to the political people. They report to the people in Prime Minister's office, and they do their bidding. So as much as they may not be political animals, they're people that are under the political thumb of the leadership, the ultimate leadership being the Prime Minister's office. So as long as this goes, the scandal has gone on way too long. It could have been simplified had Trudeau actually opened up all the files earlier this year and said he had nothing to hide. He did nothing wrong. He didn't do anything like that. Instead, he doubled down and circled the wagons. And here we are with Andrew Scheer basically calling him a liar. And we'll see how far that goes during this campaign. But, it's got to be asked during this campaign why Justin Trudeau was really so gung-ho on trying to protect this company, which has really sullied the reputation of Canada around the world. As much as he can peddle his spin that it's all about protecting jobs, that can only go so far, especially when it's about jobs of some people that were in this company and were doing the wrong things with money that the shareholders trusted them, and wrong thing with money that taxpayers trusted them. And that the more Justin Trudeau goes along with that spin that it's all about the jobs and protecting a company, the more people should be asking about why Justin Trudeau doesn't want to actually do anything about stamping out corruption here in Canada. I was reminded last night when this story came out in the Globe and Mail about the latest twist and turn in the Lav Scam scandal, is what it's called on social media, Lav Scam. Well, 4 years ago, on September 10th, 2015, was when Justin Trudeau was on campaign in West Vancouver at a pier near Ambleside Beach, and I asked him, I grilled him there about SNC-Lavalin's corruption allegations, about spending money in that industry, and why he wasn't going, or if he was going to do anything if he became Prime Minister to try to control that, to try to root out corruption. Didn't get any satisfactory answers, but he did say in no uncertain terms that he was going to lead an open and transparent administration with integrity, and that there was going to be, if he won, a Prime Minister in power who he could trust. He was casting at the time, of course, Stephen Harper as an untrustworthy, dishonest Prime Minister, and he was going to do better. He's going to deliver honesty and transparency to the Prime Minister's office. That's what he said 4 years ago, and here we are now. with a lot of questions about the integrity of this administration and whether the Trudeau Liberals deserve another 4 years.
Now, before the last election, the Liberals in the polls were in third place. The NDP was in first. What kind of shape are the NDP in under Jagmeet Singh?
Yeah, that was that summer of 2015 when Stephen Harper called the election closer to the start of August. And it was the record long election campaign in Canadian history. And at the time, a lot of people were talking about a Prime Minister Mulcair, Prime Minister Tom Mulcair, that there would be a Prime Minister from Quebec again. He'd be an NDP Prime Minister, and there'd be a lot of change. And the NDP was promising a balanced budget of itself. They were promising change, but then came along Justin Trudeau, and his slogan was real change. They wanted to one-up the NDP and try to attract some voters from that end of the spectrum, and also try to attract some disaffected conservative voters, bring them into the mix, because there were a lot of people that were unhappy, even in the conservative tent, with Stephen Harper's leadership. Well, here we are 4 years later. Tom Mulcair isn't the leader anymore. Jagmeet Singh is, and he narrowly won his seat in Burnaby back in the spring. And there were a lot of questions about whether that would be enough for him. And since then, the NDP really has not done much to inspire interest in Jagmeet Singh. They have not had much in the way of fundraising or awareness raising throughout the spring and the summer. They've lost some veteran MPs who you thought could have been cabinet material had the NDP, miraculously got into government after being in opposition once. But it looks like they won't even have a chance to be in opposition. The polls are looking very dim for Jagmeet Singh, and on the day the election formally starts, they actually have one candidate in Kamloops who they have struck off the list, and now they're looking for a replacement because of some dirty social media posts from years past. So the NDP is looking very, very poor coming into this campaign, and Jagmeet Singh will need to play a lot of catch-up to get known by a lot of Canadian citizens and to inspire people to his vision and the NDP platform. That's going to be easier said than done. Because you've got the Greens. Elizabeth May is really reinvigorated, and they've done a lot of fundraising, and there seems to be a lot of momentum within the Greens. Even though they have just a two-member caucus, they could expand that exponentially at the expense of the NDP, but also expense of the Liberals. So this could be anyone's election. Still, there are forecasts that it might end in a minority in favor of Trudeau, and there's questions about what would happen then. Who would support who to keep out the Conservatives? Still, we've got a long way to go. It's a 40-day campaign, and the Conservatives would have the biggest war chest. Of course, the Liberals have a large war chest themselves, but they've been spending a lot of money, a lot of public money, to get Justin Trudeau around the country since the end of May, basically using taxpayers' money to back their campaign. There's going to be enough there to throw back at Justin Trudeau through all the broken promises, whether it's the balanced budget, whether it's democratic reform, and the SNCLavalin scandal, which continues, and even small things like choosing the date of the trip to the Governor General to dissolve Parliament and actually formally call the election. September 11th is the date that Justin Trudeau chose. He could have chosen many dates in the last several weeks or last month. He had until September 15th to call it, but for some reason chose September 11th, which does raise some eyebrows, because September 11th is, again, it's the day of remembering the horrific tragedy of the terrorist attacks in New York, Washington, D.C., and Pennsylvania. 26 Canadians died among the thousands who died in that horrible day that a lot of Canadians still remember. It was 18 years ago. Justin Trudeau, for some reason, decided to choose September 11th, and as much as he started his speech at RINO Hall by saying he remembered the people that perished on that horrible day through those terrorist attacks, it seemed a little bit disingenuous and seemed a little bit wrong to start a campaign on a day when people still have fresh memories of that horrible day. Why couldn't you have started it a day later to at least remove that cloud from the day? That could be something that could come back to haunt him. It could get. We'll see what Andrew Scheer or Elizabeth May or Jagmeet Singh say at the debate. Of course, then you could turn it around and the same question could be asked of those leaders. Well, why did those leaders have to follow suit and begin their campaign on the same day? Could they have not stood up on principle and said, we're going to be quiet today because of September 11th, we'll start our campaign the next day? But then again, that's the competitive nature in politics when the prize is big on October 21st.
Is the People's Party of Canada going to be a factor, perhaps draining votes away from Andrew Scheer?
I don't think so. They don't have much in the way of campaign war chest, and we saw in the Burnaby by-election and the RINO by-election there really weren't a factor. There could be a few ridings here and there where it might come down to several hundred votes. But the thing that Maxime Bernier doesn't have is a very large war chest for the advertising. The party really is an unknown quotient, and the quality of candidates may be fair to middling. It may also be candidates that may not make it to election day if things about their past get dredged out. We've seen some errors along the way by Maxime Bernier, some errors of judgment, posing for photos with white supremacists, and that party does have a bit of a reputation as being a magnet for people who are not quite in the mainstream. It could be a place for people to park a protest vote, but I think it could also help out Andrew Scheer that anyone who may be perceived as an extremist might leave his party and go to the People's Party of Canada. And again, we need to see Maxime Bernier articulate a platform that's more built on policy than just attention-getting headlines and slogans. I mean, having said that, though, he still does have a strong case to be made to get into the leadership debates. He is an MP, veteran MP, and he does have a lot of candidates throughout the country. I think he's got more than the Liberals had for a time, and definitely has more than NDP do going into the campaign. He just doesn't have the electoral track record because it's a new party. So he may be sitting on the outside looking in like Elizabeth May was last time for some of the debates, and she did a smart thing, and when she couldn't get into the debates, well, she had her own parallel debate. She went on social media and gave her own answers to some of the questions that were asked of leaders on live TV, and even gave some counter ideas through social media that was able a way for her to communicate with her supporters. So we'll see if Maxime Bernier might try the same trick if he can't get into the debates. But the People's Party of Canada, again, even if they do draw some moderate candidates, they're going to have a hard time getting that attention just because they don't have the track record, and it tends to be that voters do go for the tried, tested, and true, the party brands that stand up there. And if he can't get into the debates, and if he isn't able to crisscross the country like the other leaders are, and isn't able to get the media attention as well, then this is going to be a bit of a flash in the pan.
And also another roadblock thrown up for Mr. Bernier. The RINO Party of Canada is putting a candidate up for election in Bernier's home riding, who is also named Maxime Bernier. Is this a joke or some kind of conspiracy?
Oh, that's a smart thing for the RINOs. I haven't looked at that in depth, but if he actually has legal identification that allows him to put that on the ballot, that could be very interesting. It could remind people of what happened in Vancouver way back when, in 2005, when Sam Sullivan was running against Jim Green. Jim Green, the longtime left-wing politician and activist. There was also a James Green on the ballot, and there was some suggestion, never really put to bed, and still some questions about it years later, if people in the Sam Sullivan camp conveniently found a James Green to run against the Jim Green in order to confuse voters and draw enough votes away from the Jim Green and into the James Green, because they knew that Jim Green was someone who had name recognition and was popular in some circles of the city, and that they knew that they couldn't get all the votes that they wanted for Sam Sullivan, so run a voter suppression or voter distraction technique. There was a lot of questions about that. I remember sitting at a Denny's one day back in the fall of 2005, and a bus went by that said vote James Green. And I looked at that for a moment, had a bit of a double take, and I thought to myself, vote James Green. I know there's a Jim Green. I'd never known Jim Green to call himself James Green, and I didn't know he had enough money in his campaign to rent a bus to drive around the city. So that was what was going on back then in 2005. So the Greens, I don't know if the Greens would necessarily be involved in some kind of sophisticated operation to try to confuse voters. The Greens, the RINOs, though, are a party with a long history of satire. So this is a great way to try to kind of poke Maxime Bernier in the eye by running someone else named Maxime Bernier and having them on the same ballot. Let's see what kind of effect that has there, because Maxime Bernier could be in for a race with some other contestants there that other parties are putting up against him, that the People's Party may not even have someone in the House of Commons after October 21st, even if Maxime Bernier can't win his own seat.
Should Bernier be in the debates?
Well, based on the numbers that he has, if he can have a candidate in every riding across the country and also be himself a veteran MP, then that makes the case for it. But of course, we've seen in the past, as I mentioned earlier, that Elizabeth May wasn't able to get into the debates, even though she had a large number of candidates and she had a track record. We'll see what that means. We'll see if Maxime Bernier goes to court to challenge it, but certainly his followers will be unhappy and will make their position known if he's not allowed to be in the debates. Even in one of the debates. But again, he can use social media as a backstop in case that happens.
Of course, as Bernier's fighting to get in, the Prime Minister says he will not be taking part in all the debates. Why would he do that?
Well, the control of the message. That there's too many questions dogging Trudeau about his 4 years in office. And his people want to keep a lid on it. They don't want that one embarrassing moment to be magnified to the point that it causes the Liberals to lose. The Liberals are already bruised as it is, and I think that they fear that a well-prepared Andrew Scheer, well-prepared Elizabeth May, well-prepared Jagmeet Singh, and if Maxime Bernier gets in, a well-prepared Maxime Bernier could come to the table and ask that one tough question that gets Justin Trudeau off his speaking notes, off his script. And when he gets off his scripts, funny things can happen. We saw what happened with that news conference where someone asked a simple question about single-use plastics in the Trudeau household, and he couldn't articulate his words properly and ended up with that very awkward statement about a drink box water bottle kind of thing. He didn't look good that day, and if that happens again during the election and is turned into a story of the day, it could snowball into something that could become an attack ad. And if he says the wrong thing during one of those debates, that really could harm his chances to get reelected. As we've seen, the Liberals, the incumbent government, have not been able to raise as much money as they had hoped. They have not been able to draw as many candidates as they hoped. They had to appoint a lot of candidates in the final weeks before the election started. people weren't lining up to join the Liberals or rejoin the Liberals. People had gone elsewhere. There's a lot of people that are still very unhappy with the treatment of Jody Wilson-Raybould and Jane Philpott, and how long the SNC-Lavalin scandal dominated headlines earlier this year. There's traditional Liberals who've lost faith in Trudeau, and that's going to be the tail of the tape. Will the Liberals be able to bring them back to the fold? Will they be able to stop them from voting for competitors, or will those Liberal voters who helped push the Liberals over the finish line in 2015, will they just stay home? That's also a fear of a party, that if they can't motivate their base, then they very much are staring defeat in the face.
We'll have more with Bob Mackin right after this.
Engineer Gold Mines is focused on the exploration and development of the historic high-grade Engineer Gold Mine situated 32 kilometers southwest of Atlin, British Columbia. Engineer Gold Mines is fully permitted for surface and underground exploration with the 2019 drill program now underway. Engineer Gold Mines Limited trades on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol EAU. For more information, please visit us at engineergoldmines.com.
Grand Portage Resources' Herbert Gold Project in southeast Alaska highlights increased gold resource, indicated and inferred, of 860,000 ounces, in excess of 10 grams per ton gold. Expansion drilling is planned on the Herbert Gold property for the summer of 2019. Grand Portage Resources trading symbols are GPG on the TSX Venture, GPTRF on the OTCQB, and GPB on Frankfurt. For more information, please visit our website, grandportage.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Bob Mackin. Bob, the Rugby Sevens are in a labor board dispute. I guess the players want to be treated like employees, and the BC Labor Board said you are, but Rugby Canada says they're not. What's this whole dispute about?
Yeah, well, the members of Canada's Rugby Sevens team were certified as United Steelworkers. They haven't yet actually had the full ratification, because that's been blocked by the appeals of Rugby Canada. But the BC Labour Relations Board decided that the United Steelworkers is the union to represent the players. There was a reconsideration attempt by the Rugby Canada, but Rugby Canada has actually gone to BC Supreme Court with a petition. And with that petition, they're hoping a judge will overturn the decision of the BC Labour Relations Board. And because the Rugby Canada says that the athletes are receiving some funding, they're amateur athletes, they don't have the ability to go through workers' compensation or employment standards. They are amateur athletes, and if the Labour Board ruling stands, that they say will change the dynamic of Canadian amateur sports forever, where all athletes with these amateur national sporting bodies will have to be paid and will be treated like employees. And they also say there's a worry that if there is a labor dispute, that might mean that athletes and teams will miss out on World Cups, miss out on Olympics. They say that Rugby Canada, and through their lawyer, says that Rugby Canada is a federal organization, that it's involved in trade and commerce that extends beyond the limits of a single province. They say that really this is a constitutional issue, that national sports organizations are national and they should not be beholden to provincial labor laws and provincial labor relations regulators. This could get very interesting, and if it does involve constitutional arguments like that, then this is very possible that this could end up in an even higher court than British Columbia's, maybe even decided by the Supreme Court of Canada, because this would redefine the whole relationship between athletes with national sports organizations and their governing bodies. The athletes on the Canada Rugby Sevens team, they receive a $5,000 bonus for appearing in the Canada Sevens tournament, the one that happens every year at BC Place. For international World Series stops, they get $400 a game. Sevens World Cup, The same thing, $400 a game. It's $250 a game for Rugby America's North tournaments. The team was allocated more than $280,000 in 2017-2018, and the men's players, they receive about $900 to $1,500 a month from Sport Canada through their carding allowance. So that's not enough to give full-time employment to these players. A lot of these players do have other jobs. Some of them do play professionally in other countries, but they want more. They want to be able to give more of their time, especially when a lot of their time spent is training, and they train over in Langford, the Victoria suburb. And so the Rugby Sevens men's team has this ruling in their favor from the Labor Relations Board here in British Columbia. This could affect also the 15s team, which played at BC Place on the weekend in the send-off match against the United States before they go to play in the Rugby World Cup in Japan, and other sports organizations are watching this too, because you do have, for instance, the women's national soccer team, which really is the standard bearer for Canada soccer. The men's team has not had as much success as the women have, and the women's team has gained much more attention nationwide and worldwide. Just like the American women's team, which is the two-time defending World Cup champion. They want more money, so they're suing for it, but they're not going through a labor relations board. They're going through the courts in the United States. So I think this is actually just part of a trend that we're seeing happen here in Canada, but it's happening in other countries worldwide, where sporting organizations which are helping athletes compete at the highest level are also competing in events which are gaining very lucrative TV contracts, ticket sales, and sponsorship, and they just want a fair share of the revenue that their organizations are bringing in.
Yes, and we've seen in the U.S. as well, college football teams suing to make at least minimum wage, even though they get scholarships and their clothing and housing and tuition paid for. They say they bring in hundreds of millions of dollars, so why shouldn't they share in that as well?
Oh, indeed. NCAA football, NCAA basketball, I mean, these are billion-dollar enterprises. They're professional sports played by athletes who are termed amateur, and whose coaches are paid, roughly in the same bracket as professional coaches. And in some states in the United States, the highest paid public employee is the football coach at a public university. That's how lucrative it is. They're looking at all the revenue, all the merchandise that's sold, all the TV advertising that's sold around the live broadcasts, the tickets, the bowl games that happen, and for basketball, NCAA basketball, there's the Final Four. These are major events, and they attract a lot of money and a lot of attention for the universities, and the athletes want to be compensated fairly. It does get into a bit of a touchy territory too, because the football athletes, the basketball athletes for the biggest universities in the United States, the revenue they bring in does benefit other athletes who practice sports that don't get anywhere near the same attention, whether it's swimming, soccer, hockey. Athletes in other sports do benefit because of the money brought in. So there are questions about equity among sports, not just equity among male and female athletes, and equity among the athletes in the sports where they're getting the most attention and where the universities are bringing in the most revenue. So it's a very complicated subject, but definitely a subject that does need to be rated and debated these days, because there have been stories also in the NCAA where, because the athletes are not considered employees, they have no protection. And some of the athletes who gain scholarships to play on the elite teams of the elite universities might get injured, and if they get injured and can't continue playing, then their ability to stay at the university and continue studying gets impacted, and suddenly the player is off the team. So that's another area where lawyers representing athletes, current and former athletes in the NCAA, are trying to push for some sort of resolution. Up here in Canada, of course, we don't have the strong university sports infrastructure, but we do have a very strong major junior hockey infrastructure, and those lawsuits are continuing, whereby hockey players who played in the major junior ranks, and some that still are trying through the courts to get the Canada Hockey League, which is the umbrella for the major junior hockey leagues in Western Canada, and Ontario and Quebec and the Maritimes, to pay players in some way, shape, or form, at least minimum wage, because the players are eligible, depending on how many years they play, to get post-hockey college tuition paid for, which is a very good program that does exist, but there are limits to that program, that it's time limited, that players, after they're finished major junior hockey, have to enroll in and complete their studies at a certain period of time after they're finished hockey, which actually harms the ability of some players to go and play hockey elsewhere. That not every player is NHL quality. It's hard to get into the NHL, but there are players in major junior hockey who have excelled enough to continue their career in hockey in places in Europe, and you can make a decent living in Europe, a decent six-figure salary in Germany or Switzerland or maybe even Sweden. And some players want to continue playing for a few more years before they take advantage of their college tuition funds through major junior hockey. And some players have had to make the tough decision that, do you go and continue your professional hockey career, even if that means you don't get to enjoy your entitled college tuition, because it would be beyond the deadline set by major junior hockey. So a lot of questions about that, and a lot of questions about the future viability of some of the franchises too, because not every franchise in major junior hockey is in a big market. Not every franchise is in a market like Vancouver or near Toronto or Edmonton. Some of them are in small towns, small industrial towns, small prairie towns, where they still draw in the couple of thousands. When they still have a smaller arena, they don't have a big arena, and they don't have the revenue potential that they do in the bigger markets. So that's another area that needs to be worked out and negotiated on. But right now, it's all about litigation.
We'll have more with Bob Mackin right after this.
Media recognition from Bloomberg, Reuters, recycling trade publications, patented process for 100% recovery of critical metals, including cobalt, lithium, nickel, manganese, aluminum. American Manganese is focused on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. American Manganese trades on the TSX Venture, AMY, the US, AMYZF, and Frankfurt 2AM. For more information, visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
Don't miss out. Stay informed. Receive the HowStreet.com weekly recap with thought-provoking podcasts, radio, and articles delivered to your inbox. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage at HowStreet.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Bob Mackin. Bob, an ex-Vancouver Airport vice president, is suing for wrongful dismissal. What's the story there?
Yeah, this is a very interesting case that, again, only has been filed in court by a former vice president of the airport authority. He was a vice president until suddenly on July the 5th. This case is in Vancouver registry of the BC Supreme Court. It revolves around a whistleblower complaint that was made, a whistleblower complaint that apparently was investigated against Stephen Hankinson, but he never, according to his court filings, never got a copy of the report, was given a list of grievances in his firing letter, and doesn't think that there was a proper procedure. He denied misconduct, called the investigation improper and wholly flawed. In his September 3rd filed Supreme Court suit against the Vancouver International Airport Authority. He claims that he provided effective and faithful service since joining in 2007, and and basically he said that the firing was insensitive, callous, and bad faith by the airport authority, and the way he was fired also caused him medical and other damage that he says can be proved if this gets to trial. Stephen Hankinson said that he was previously suffering post-traumatic stress disorder from some sort of emergency incident on an aircraft. It's not fully spelled out in the lawsuit. But he was transferred from being vice president of operations and maintenance in 2018, and then he took on a new role of innovation and development at the airport authority for about a year, and then suddenly in July he was fired. So this case could get interesting if it does end up in court. He's of course hoping it does, and hoping that the airport authority will settle with him because of the wrongful dismissal nature and the contract breach that he alleges. It also offers a glimpse into how high executive compensation is at the airport authority. The airport authority is a private non-for-profit group. They'd like to say that they're a private community not-for-profit group. It's a company essentially that privatized the airport operations and has its own version of a tax, the airport improvement fee. It takes the revenue from every person who passes through the airport coming and going and puts that in a big fund and uses that to build a better airport. They have certainly built a better airport than it was back in the 1990s before they took over. But this is also a group which it leases the airport lands from Transport Canada, but it is also very opaque. They do issue a financial report every year, and they say they make a good profit every year, which is good, and they run the airport, and they've received a lot of international awards for the way they run the airport, and they've attracted more airlines to Vancouver International Airport. It really is an economic dynamo, but at the same time, there's a lot of questions about the money that they do spend and how they spend, and we're not allowed to know because they don't actually have board meetings in public. They have an annual board information meeting for the public to go and see the release of their financials, but otherwise it's very secretive. So through this lawsuit filed by Stephen Hankinson, the former vice president, he does say that his annual base salary was more than $267,000. He received a couple of bonuses every year, a short-term incentive up to about $120,000, and an annual long-term incentive up to $147,000. They also gave him a car allowance of about $10,000 plus insurance and fuel, and the airport authority contributed to his RSP and also his medical services plan. So his lawsuit says that in 2018 he reported to Revenue Canada that he was paid a total compensation package of about $495,000 in that year from the airport authority. So almost $500,000 for being vice president of the Vancouver International Airport Authority, and that's just one of the executives. And that's the pay that he's making. So you've got someone working in an airport authority, a vice president, who is being paid more than the Prime Minister of Canada, and he's being paid a little bit more than the head of TransLink is. Not to say his job wasn't important, but again, now we know a little bit more about his compensation. That's something that the public can think about.
Well, it's not a bad salary for a non-profit.
No, and well, that's the airport authority for you. They call themselves a nonprofit and cast themselves as this community organization benefiting the community. Why don't they just tell the truth? They're basically a private company in almost every sense of the way, leasing the airport's lands from Transport Canada. And if you bring it back to what we started with, talking about the federal election, that was something else that we were expecting during the last 4 years was a new way of governance, perhaps even privatization of the airport and seaport in Vancouver. That was being talked about early on in Trudeau in his governance, because they were looking at different ways of funding the infrastructure here in Canada to pay for things like the Broadway subway or other bridge projects or transit projects across the country, and they were looking at innovative ways of doing that. And one of the ways they're looking at was to possibly privatize airports, privatize seaports. And that's one of the reasons why there's a big deficit, is because they decided not to do it. David Emerson, who helped set up the Airport Authority and was involved in the Vancouver Port Authority many, many years ago, was brought back to write a report about the options, to weigh the costs and the benefits, and whether this would be a good way of doing things. And the report didn't really validate the ideas that Trudeau had, and they put that on the shelf, basically, and decided not to privatize airports and seaports. So here we are. We still have this private, not-for-profit organization running Vancouver International Airport, and the airport is doing pretty well, but that was going to be an interesting way of trying to finance infrastructure by selling some assets and bringing that money into the Treasury to pay for other assets. That didn't happen.
Well, it's easy to see why they're a non-profit if they're paying employees $500,000 a year. Bob, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you.
My guest has been award-winning investigative reporter Bob Mackin, the publisher of thebreaker.news, his website, thebreaker.ca. If you have any questions for Bob or any of our other guests, you can send them to info@howstreet.com. Find us on Twitter at Talk Digital Net, our YouTube channel, Talk Digital Network. I'm Jim Goddard. Thank you for listening.
Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. The Goddard Report is available online and mobile at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. The Goddard Report is a production of Howe Street Media Incorporated.